Good afternoon. It's Celeste of Astrology by Celeste. Yes, it is. I'm so excited for my conversation today with Wade Caves. Let's see. There you are. Hi, Wade. Okay. Wait, let me see. I can. You got it. Is there going to be? Hi, everyone. Welcome. I think I'm having a technical. Okay. There we go.
It worked.
Yay!
Okay, this is great. Celeste, the very first time I've ever done this. I'm so nervous. I
Don't be nervous, Wade.
oh my gosh, I had to call somebody to have them walk me through. We did a mock. I was like, how does the background? I look.
You you look good. You sound good. Everything's going to be fine. I'm so excited to talk to you.
Yeah, me too. I'm really looking forward to this. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for accepting. So let me introduce you to my audience. So Wade Caves, do you say pronounce that right,
Yeah,
Caves?
you got it. You
Okay.
got
Is a Brooklyn-based astrologer. That's why. Did you like your theme music?
Yeah, right.
the the Beastie
But
Boys.
my page, I was like, I hope it keeps the music. I didn't know if it would, but I shared it.
Oh, good. Yeah, I think like I wanted to invite you as a collaborator. One thing with Instagram, I had to change from astrologer to entrepreneur in order to be able to use all the different music. So
Oh, okay.
yes,
Interesting.
so if you want to like post things with music, you have to do that. So you're a astrological consultant and educator who specializes in horary, electional, and classical techniques. And Wade was one of my teachers. I took horary class, which I talk about frequently on my program with the School of Traditional Astrology, led by Deb Holding. And I love horary, which I say all the time. And I'm always amazed by your insights, Wade, and take many of your sometimes I can't come live, but I love going to the
Oh,
workshops
the
you
web.
do where you talk about techniques and things. So you're just a brilliant astrologer who lives in Brooklyn and is got a lot of awards and accolades and often speaks at conferences. So I don't know if you want to add anything to your
No, I think you bigged me up enough. I think that's fine. But
Yes, and you got me into looking at the Aries ingresses. So I wanted to talk to you about that
okay.
with you today. And why don't you let us know and my audience know about like why they're so important and the meaning of them and yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
absolutely. So, Um, the, most of the astrology that we get introduced to is birth chart astrology. So we talk about, when somebody was born. Our own birth charts become very important because we want to figure out, who we're perfectly matched with and who to fall in love with and don't be with me. It's like all the kind of stuff you do to have fun. You want to know if you're going to be rich, you can have the best job. Personality astrology, lifetime astrology, that seems to be like a major driving force into the astrological world. But astrology has much wider application than just birth chart astrology. And um, perhaps the oldest application of astrological technique was when we were using the positions of the planets to forecast, whether we'd have a good season ahead, good harvest. How is agriculture going to be? What kind of weather can we expect? Are we looking for peace or war from people who are from distant lands, peace or war on our homeland? So these were the questions that were really important to ancient civilization. And techniques developed to begin to explore these kind of themes. The Aries Ingress is a really, really important one throughout the tradition. You see it used right back through Ptolemy all the way forward with a lot of investment in the astrologers who follow the Ptolemaic tradition. But what we essentially do, it's kind of like, when you go outside to see if there's what the groundhog says, whether it's 2 more weeks of winter or whatever. It's the same exact principle. We're kind of going outside, taking the weather a little bit, and getting a sense as to, what's going on in the world around us. So the Aries ingress happens one time a year. It's the very beginning. It's the technical first minute of spring. It's at the vernal equinox, usually on the 20th of March, but it can be a day earlier, a day later, depending on where you're at. And It happens at the exact same moment for everyone around the world, the exact same moment. So the planets will all be in the same position, same place for, me, somebody in Turkey, somebody in Beijing. We're all going to have the exact same configurations. They just will be in different areas. The houses will be different. The angles will be different. And so that gives us an understanding about how the different themes um, interact with particular localities. So.
That's amazing. A perfect explanation of it. And yeah, so people, you can put in questions if you have them in the question mark. But yeah, I love it. And last year's Aries Ingress, I want to talk about how last year showed up. One of the key features of it was that Venus, the planet that rules women, relationships, harmony, all of that
Yep.
stuff was besieged
Yep.
between Mars and Saturn, the two big baddies in the sun, in the ninth house for the United States, which rules courts.
That's right.
And the moon was at the 29th degree of Libra, about to dive into her fall in Scorpio, and it was in the fifth house of like children and sex and all that stuff. And it was so on point about Roe versus Wade being overturned and a lot of other things that happened with women around the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have any thoughts about how that, anything else?
And just so everybody knows, on my YouTube, I have a whole breakdown of the astrology of what happened around Roe v. Wade and the Supreme Court case that got leaked by Politico a couple of months beforehand. And yeah, when I think I heard it from at least, I think 8 other astrologers when we were all looking at the Aries Ingress for 2022, that this looked like legal battles connected to women, is certainly in the US. But Venus being between Mars, we were going to, expect women's uprisings in other parts of the world as well, especially those places where we see it angular or in like really important houses. For us, we ended up having this in the ninth house, so this whole drama came out in the courts. Like that seemed to be the big point of focus. And the moon being in the fifth house, about to move into Scorpio, that Scorpio thing it's a really big deal. When I was looking at the astrology of the laws connected to Roe versus Wade and Roe herself, whose name was Norma McCorvey, Scorpio was such a strong, resounding theme across all of those charts. That what we saw was the fifth cusp in Scorpio, somebody's Mars in Scorpio, and they're all like the first, ninth, and fifth houses. The first, is about action, I suppose. Ninth, courts, and then fifth, pregnancy. It was so often that when you had the water signs on those 3 cusps, you saw developments. That was actually about as easy as the technique that I used to predict the week that the Supreme Court would release their decision, was purely looking at the first week that came up in that window when we expected to hear something where there were water signs on the cusp of the first, ninth, and fifth. That was the one, and you could see the astrology really strongly connected. But that was echoed, and this is where, today's conversation is about. We saw the seed for that planted in the Aries Ingress chart, at the start of the year. So
I have a question.
Yeah.
So the first, fifth, and ninth, seeing water signs, was that about lunations, or what?
Yes.
What were you looking for?
Clarify that, did I? Yes. So I was looking at the new and full moons.
Okay.
All of those charts, and then there were a number of them in the back half of last year, leading right up into the election, that had the first, fifth, and ninth all in water signs. So it was a very clear connection between what was happening in the early summer and what was happening around the election cycle. If you remember that morning of the election, there was the eclipse that happened, particularly crazy one at 6 a.m. before the polls opened. And yeah, the astrology was hearkening back right to the eclipse when the Politico News article broke, and that was on the back of an eclipse in Taurus, and that was a solar eclipse. And then we had the lunar eclipse in Taurus within just a couple of degrees away on election day. So it was like you just knew this was going to be a theme. And when you were taking a look, if you look at the new and full moon charts based on Washington DC, absolutely clear first, fifth, ninth, when they've got water signs. We were hearing news, development, sometimes grandstanding. There was a lot of conversations on the left and right about what's going to be done, and those conversations and those drives were done during those first, fifth, and ninth. And I'm also thinking about those placements. One of the things that was really fascinating was how frequently Mars also showed up in this conversation. So it was a real sense of, Mars has that association with the water triplicity. Anyway, it's not frequently discussed, but it's there. So anyway, yeah, it's a fascinating case study of how Aries work and how they give you a sense of what's going to be planted over the course of the year. I think you hit it, on the head. I'm looking at it, but on my other screen here. So
Yeah, what is your YouTube channel so people can go watch that?
Oh, I'm sure it's just my username, like YouTube, whatever the channel back. Wade Caves.
Wade Caves on YouTube. Okay. Yeah, because I'm sure people will be really interested in watching that. And I loved what you shared about that, the 1st, 5th, and 9th. I will start watching that for Washington, D.C. water signs and seeing what comes up about Roe v. Wade. And so we had that in the United States. I think it was in the 6th house of England, and the Queen died.
Yeah.
Her health failed because she was like, almost 100.
Yeah. This was a Saturn square for her, if I remember correctly. She's got Scorpio 7, and she's got Aquarius rising or something like this. I can't remember if I've got the Aquarius rising.
Capricorn.
It might be. Yeah. And then she's got that Saturn right on the midheaven in Scorpio. And so you kind of got the sense that this Mars-Saturn conjunction, which I think happened at 22 degrees of Aquarius, if I remember, that was right, what was going on with her midheaven. And it was a lot,
Yeah. And then Liz Truss was prime minister for a day.
Yeah, she sent the pound tanking. My goodness, her and what was the gentleman who was with her, who was over the exchequer? I can't remember now, the treasury, but they had a rough couple of weeks. Oh my goodness,
that was wild. Yeah, that was around the Mercury retrograde and uprising of women in Iran, and like Jacinda Barrett from New Zealand leaving her post, as well as the first minister in Scotland. What was her? Nicola someone?
Yeah. Nicola Sturgeon.
Thank you. Yeah, so much about women was difficult.
Well, Anna Marin, who is the prime minister of I believe it's, hold on, I want to get it right. Finland. Could you imagine me saying something and it wasn't Finland, but saying Finland live? That'd be so embarrassing. So, Sanna Marin. So she also, she was, I know the youngest prime minister that Finland's had, and also a woman. And she was really lambasted at some stage over the course of the year based on accusations of inappropriate relationships with certain men. It was like,
oh, I remember that. Yes, she was slut shamed for like going out and having a good time. Yeah,
for 31, or whatever her age is. But it was shocking. But it was all over the place last year.
Yeah, so many places, and I say that to bring up this year in the Aries Ingress, which is happening March 20th at 5:24 p.m. in Washington, D.C. for anyone who wants to cast the chart. Venus is next to the North Node in domicile and in the sign of Taurus, also in the 9th house for the United States. What do you think about that? Venus next to the North Node in domicile.
Yeah, it's a complete inversion of what we had last year. I kind of looked at this and thought, if there was willpower for it, there is an avenue here for codifying Roe versus Wade. I don't know what it would look like. I'm not sure if it would be something that's federal or if it's something that's held by region. There's something very strong that's being shown here with Venus conjunct the North Node. But, I gave a webinar recently about the node. The points that we talked about was how the South Node requires almost no effort. You can just stumble your way into South Node choices. But North Node choices require diligent effort, action. It's like easier to fall off a chair than to stand up on one. So I think the thing about the Venus North Node conjunction, we're going to need effort behind it. There's going to be organization behind it. There's going to need to be action. It's not going to fall, in anybody's lap or anything like that. So it's going to require a little more, motion from the people that together. But certainly conjunct the North Node, in a fixed sign, there's opportunities for a reversal, on how this topic gets discussed. But I will also say, there's room for surprises about this too, because Venus in Taurus would certainly scream, a shrining of women's right to choose and other things like this, and the upholding of women's right to have something to connection to what gets done with their own body, But the thing is that it's also opposite Scorpio, and so many of these developments happened with a strong theme in Scorpio. And so, I think what we're going to be waiting for is not just this Venus being in Taurus, but when she gets triggered by contacts from planets in Scorpio. So we might be watching for oppositions that come from, the moon passing through or any other planet throughout the course of the year. So we'll see how this all kind of comes down. I suppose it could also be Scorpio rising or on the midheaven, and then that puts that Venus angular as well. So it satisfies. I'm just expecting there to be some Scorpio signature, I guess.
Okay, because the South Node's in Scorpio, opposite that
Scorpio,
Venus.
all of those charts, yeah, it's like it made itself known. I wish I had the charts in front of me, but yeah, it's a
Okay.
very loud and strong sign for this discussion.
Yeah. Well, what else do you see with Venus being conjunct? Before we do that, why don't you explain, like, just bullet points about the North Node versus the South Node with your thoughts on
Yeah.
what they mean in people's charts as well as in mundane astrology.
So the North and South Node, they represent places where the moon in her trajectory is moving up or down on her own path. The node itself, it marks the intersection between the sun's path and the moon's path. And so they are obviously going to be vulnerable places for the luminaries because they can be eclipsed there. However, these become the hinges that are representative of, really powerful moments of turning. They are to the moon what 0 degrees of Aries and 0 degrees of Libra are to the sun. They have the same impact. They're the intersection of one's orbit plus the thing it's, moving around. So in the zodiac, we're talking about the sun and the sun's path. So the North Node, it seems in my mind to be connected with, and through the experience that I've looked at, the North and South Node together, they describe differences in height. So it could be quite a literal thing where we're talking about things like elevators and staircases and going up and going down. It could be talking about promotion and demotion. It could be talking about up for oneself or shrinking under the weight of one's own insecurity. Very frequently with the North Node, it's requiring us to stand into a position of strength, whereas the South Node is usually actions that we do with our South Node. They tend to have a feeling of regret that follows them, a feeling of disappointment, a feeling of like I have made a mistake in a way. So the South Node has this this kind of association with falling or tripping up in some way. So that's kind of where the symbolism sits with me. So Venus conjunct the North Node, I mean, this is certainly going to be, I think when you think North Node, we think flights. I mean, people getting on planes and going up in the air. And Venus in the North Node could be a good time for the American airline industry to really ramp up its consumer protections, for instance. I mean, there's been a lot of legal things in the courts because we're talking about ninth house, right? So if the ninth house has themes to travel, of course it does. The North Node is about travel that takes us up. So, I'm getting a little bit of an image from that about potential air travel. But, Venus and Taurus, it's also good for the cattle industry. It's good for agriculture. Taurus is the cow, and so a benefic being sign of the bull, that's good for the markets. It's good for, generally good for markets because they have this signature of the bull market, so there's a little bit of with North Node. But also I think with the cattle industry, it's probably going to be a fairly decent year. The thing is that Jupiter's also, so the markets themselves don't appear to quite be as protected to us as they might have been otherwise if Jupiter was angry. I felt better about what's going on with the markets. But yeah, this Jupiter 8th, and I believe the Mars in the 10th also suggests like great variability that is likely to happen over the course of the year in terms of commodity pricing. And then there's Saturn on an angle. And that Saturn, this guy's been like really kind of occupying my brain for a while, because what's going on with Saturn and Pisces is kicking up a lot of dust at the moment. So I'm thinking right now about the square to the midheaven. I recently wrote a piece for the TMA that's going to get published in a couple of months about monopoly law and all of the things happening in the U.S. right now, trying to crack who are having unfair advantage. So, whether we're talking about Facebook or Microsoft, airlines were a part of this as well, that there seems to be a really big focus on trying to crack down on companies getting too big to fail. And when monopoly law, antitrust law, was introduced in the US, it was introduced when Saturn was at 1 Virgo. And and that was on the ascendant that year. So we have actually the same angles as when antitrust law was introduced in 1890, and Saturn's in the exact degree for degree exact opposition. So I'll be interested to see how that develops over the course of the year. So there's a lot going on. I think when you work with progressives, we can talk about what's happening in the political arena. We can talk about agriculture. We can talk about weather. We can talk about pop culture as well. What are the big voices that are going to be really exciting? And this year, we've got Venus conjunct the North Node, and an angular Mars and an angular Moon conjunct Neptune. Those are going to be really award shows. Anybody who's got personal planets plugging into these, they're going to come in with a bit of a lift. They're going to have a little bit more like, support from the broader environment. So there's anything that we can see if we want when we look into here. I've also been kind of looking for what's going on with Biden. Did you notice what's happening with the 10th ruler and the 10th house and all of that?
Okay, so the 10th house is in Gemini. I have 4 Gemini here. So representing the authority, representing the president. I already think Kamala Harris is going to somehow be president this year. I could be totally wrong.
For a really long time, when they announced this, and then there have been a couple of years where there have been signatures so insistent on Kamala Harris rising that I've been just thinking they are planning for this. If you notice, she's really in the background quite a bit. She's not loud. She's not out there. I don't know what that means for her, but what I'm noticing is that in this year, that Mars right on is at her ascendant at 27 degrees Gemini, and she's yeah, exactly. And the 10th ruler's in the 8th. It's bust. The 8th ruler's in the 10th. There's another point to the possibility here of an administrative change.
Let me tell people what I'm looking at the chart. So Mercury is in the sign of Aries, ruling the 10th house, from the 8th house of loss, the 8th house of worry, death, anguish of the mind. And it's combust the sun within 3 degrees of the sun, bringing weakness to potentially the leader of our country. Yeah.
I mean, that's the concern, is the possibility that we could be experiencing some. But I mean, he's showed up in the news recently over the last couple of months, concerns about his health. I guess he just had a cancerous mole removed. My phone just got a notification from the Associated Press that he was in the hospital a couple months ago, although no follow-up was needed. So it doesn't seem like it was that serious. But, he's getting older. And when Saturn's squaring the midheaven, Saturn's a planet of, issues to come from old age. It happens to rule the 8th from the 10th, so we're starting to think about the possibility of, a need for change. So, I'll be watching. I don't know what will happen. I thought it was more likely last year, going on with the moon. If I remember, I think it was like right on Kamala Harris's sun. I believe she has the sun at 27 Libra and the moon was at 29 Libra. So I thought something's going on. But
I've been watching her. I thought it was interesting. Recently, she kind of stepped up, where she was in, I guess, Poland, talking about how crimes against humanity, the Russians had committed crime against humanity. So she was the leader making that statement. So I thought that was very related to her elevating her authority as she comes to her second Saturn return. Her Saturn is at, I think, 3 Pisces.
Yeah.
So Saturn moving into Pisces next week.
Bang.
That
Exactly. And the midheaven current from last year's solar return is like 3 Pisces, something like that. Let me take a look. What is it? It's 2 Pisces. You know, it's all kind of like in the mix, and I'm just kind of curious about when we get to find out what it's about. You know, we're still kind of waiting on tenterhooks to see what the deal is. But it might, reason the astrology already looks good, but also, you know, if you were a part of the Democratic Party, wanted to have a long run, you know, get up to 10 years of the same president in office, provided somebody steps down after the first 2 years have happened. So if Kamala Harris tomorrow was to take over and be president throughout the rest of this year and next year and oversee the election, it wouldn't count as her first term. So, you know, she has the ability then to carry. Part of me thinks that there's a strategy game that's being played as well. You know, but that's just, you know, me. There's no astrological component to that.
Okay, yeah, but no, I looked at this chart. I was like, is Kamala Harris going to be president? Now, also the ascendant is in Virgo. So that's a mutable sign, which suggests change. What do you think about the ascendant being here at 7 Virgo? And it's on the fixed star Thuban. I meant to look up that fixed star.
About that fixed star myself, so I wouldn't be able to say much about it. What we experience in mutable sign years are years where it's like a Goldilocks situation in terms of how the speed of things develop. Cardinal signs make things move very, very, very fast. Fixed signs slow things down. The mutable signs are somewhere in the middle, and I think what this suggests is a great deal of variability over the course of the year, where particular issues, specifically the ones that would be signified by the planets also in the mutable signs, where there would be a lot more back and forth. And we also talk a lot about how things that get started under mutable signs frequently finished. So there's a possibility that many things over the year, that when we take a look at how they begin, if they also anchor into these mutable placements, those might be major initiatives that never come to fruition because of some block that will later develop. Time, you know, transits are tough, and you know, somebody who comes in and oversees and manages a project has bad synastry with the project itself, and you know, kind of opens up a little bit of a wormhole in a way.
Yeah, and Mars still being in Gemini, carrying on that. This Mars
Neptune. I know it's been
Mars for Neptune, yeah.
Yeah, and I really feel for all the Geminis out there, because they've had Mars in their sign for the last 7 months, and it's going to continue for another yet. And it's been the slow. Mars usually makes it out of a sign within 2 months, and if he's on really good, a month and a half. So for Mars to have been in this particular sign, going all the way through it, then retrograding all the way back, and then, you know, pushing all the way forward again, you know, what it does is it just stirs up all this difficulty, heat, frustration, and also, you know, it's Mars. It's going to have accidents, broken limbs, you know, surgeries, you know, angry words, all the things that come with Mars, you know, so it's been a struggle. But Mars is soon to enter into Cancer, which is, I think, going to shift a lot of fortunes for people. I mean, we have a lot of changes that are coming up. Saturn has changed signs, Mars is changing signs, Pluto's changing signs. You know, there's going to be a pretty major shift. Although, in fairness, for many of these planets, they're only moving a few degrees. Mars is moving quite speedily. But if you're you know, experiencing Saturn just on the other side of Pisces, if you've had things in early Pisces, you've been feeling Saturn for a while. You know, he's been close by. He's been very near. So yeah, it's I think one of those years where there's a lot of almosts, a lot of attempts, a lot of half motions forward, you know, steps forward, one step back kind of situation, where the progress is it's always going to come with a footnote, and we've got to talk about the specifics about what's underneath. But it also opens up a lot of, you know, hopefully a lot of flexibility in terms of timing. You know, things not needing to be too fast. But both of the malefics in fixed are these mutable signs also is suggestive that much of the year, anything gets started where the moon is in aspect to one of the malefics, either the beginning or the end of mutable signs, that's going to have difficulty with the public at this stage, and it's going to be a global thing. So I'm paying attention to the eclipses that are happening near these degrees and the lunations that are happening in square to what's going on with the Aries Ingress. Those ones are definitely capturing my attention.
So wait, I think I missed something. You said things that are begun when the
Yeah.
moon is in mutable signs.
Yes.
So that would be Gemini,
Yeah.
Virgo, Pisces, and Sagittarius. Say that again?
Yep, that's exactly right. So if you imagine the moon, say the president wants to launch a new initiative, and he announces this when the moon is at 1 degree of Virgo. Okay. Well, that's in opposition to the Saturn of the Aries Ingress. This isn't going to go anywhere fun, And it's not just the beginning of Virgo. Say he announced it the day later when the moon was at 24 degrees of Virgo. Well, now that's in opposition to Mars. It's in square to Neptune. So we've got the beginning and end of mutable signs they're tough right now. For the duration of the year, things that happen at those periods are going to find a little bit of a difficult landing space with the public.
So even for all of us, if we're launching a
project, you want big people out there, you probably want to make sure that you're not relying too heavily on the beginning or the ends of the mutable signs. Although, of course, as the year progresses, there's more astrology that comes in and supersedes in kind of a way. New lunations will come in. But the bigger and more public the thing is, the more the Aries Ingress is going to be relevant. So that things kind of need to be taken into consideration.
Yeah, so that's why electional astrology can be so helpful for when you're planning to launch something big.
Yeah,
it's a good thing to come get a reading beforehand to help plan out the date. Either with you do consultations still, right?
I sure do. Yeah, I love doing them. And with elections, I like to have a consultation to talk about what you plan on doing, unless you absolutely have to have it done. And this is, it needs doing. But what I find very helpful is to talk a little bit about, you're starting a business. How ready are you? Sometimes people want the astrology to do all the work for them, so they do a consultation, and they think that if I can find them some magical Harry Potter wave wand perfect date, rain's gold, everything's going to work out. But of course, real life doesn't work that way. Astrology is like the 30% that's happening behind the scenes. It's important. You want to pay attention to it, but your effort, your energy, your plan, your strategy, your confidence, your timeliness, the amount of energy you've got to put into the project, that also matters. So we will look at a consultation chart together to see where the vulnerabilities in your plan are. Is there something that you've not given enough thought to, and we start to build an election strategy around that. So if we, for instance, somebody was to come with a tough aspect between Mars and Saturn, then I would want the election to soften that aspect in some way. So yeah, it's useful. And the same thing happens with Aries ingresses throughout the course of the year. You're not in a position, most of us aren't, to be advising when certain things happen, but we can compare the astrology of when they start and the astrology year,
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. You made me think of when the hairdresser says, this is a comb, not a wand.
Right.
It's like astrology can help you find the most auspicious time to launch something. But if you haven't put the work in, if you don't have that substance to what you're launching, it's not a miracle worker.
Yeah, I've not heard that before, but I think I might be borrowing that myself.
Oh, yeah. Take it. I didn't make it up. And I love it. It's so perfect. Yeah. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. So what do you think about, okay, so the moon is in the sign of Pisces, 6 degrees from Neptune at 25 Pisces in the 7th house of the other or the ally or the opponent. Like, what do you think this means for the Aries ingress?
Yeah, that's a great question. If you look at the Saturn-Jupiter conjunction that happened in December of 2020, really important because it set up a couple, over 150 years of uninterrupted conjunctions between those two planets in air signs. So it was basically like a bell saying the channel has not changed. This is the vibe we're going with for the next 150 years. And it's first of these uninterrupted Saturn-Jupiter conjunctions. And in that chart, the moon was at 27 Pisces and Neptune was at 18 Pisces. So their positions are exchanged here, so almost degree for degree. So the Neptune has moved to where the moon was, and the moon has come back around to where Neptune was. So I think that what's being reinforced here are probably the water that come out from Pisces, that come out from the moon, that come out from Neptune. So, you know, I think if I'm thinking about business, I'm obviously thinking about things like what's happening at the ports, what's happening, international trade, supply lines, things like this. But domestically, I'm also watching big water projects, like paying attention to, you know, canal expansions. There's big projects looking to bring water into Colorado, for instance, that are supposed to be wrapping up relatively soon.
And
Colorado,
with Saturn and Pisces.
I know it, and I don't think that it's a great. I think a lot of this is going to come with a lot of problem when it gets really like handed over to the public. I mean, Colorado really didn't have a whole lot of water on their own. You know, they just don't have a great watershed, so they've been piping water in from California for a long time. Now they're building from the Arkansas River, but that is a massive project. Same thing is happening right now in New York City, where one of the rivers in the watersheds that's supposed to be connecting fresh water to the city, that's being built and set to be finished within the next couple of years. So I think that there's a little bit about water conservation, what's happening at watersheds. We're already seeing things in California where they're getting an intense amount of snow, a lot of rain, and they're missing the opportunity to capture that water. You know, they did not have the infrastructure. It's running off into the ocean the moment it was lost. So I think increased conversation about what's happening with water is likely. What's happening, like law on what's happening on water, international waters is going to be very important to watch. And honestly, when things get kind of funny with Neptune, like borders start getting a little bit funny. So, I mean, when we think about things like the East China Sea and Taiwan, and you know, exactly, there's a lot of things going on in our water area of the world that I think are easily overlooked.
Yeah, and you had me thinking, talking about the Colorado River, about Mexico, because there's like some conflict with Mexico about that water, because that's, you know, it flows into their country too.
Well, listen, you know, I was just watching a video that was so informative the other day about the very geography in Mexico that makes a lot of options about how to set up camp in different parts of Mexico quite difficult. And yeah, they rely on certain like without, you know, natural rivers flowing where they need to go, entire ecosystems get destroyed within the Mexican country. So it's definitely, I would think, that require paying attention to what's going on with water is going to be an incredibly important conversation. And the Saturn-Jupiter conjunction, the reason I bring it up is it happened in Aquarius. You know, it is the forgotten water sign. You know, this is all about water dispensation, taking water and pouring it out. You know, I mean, it's the classic image about distribution of water. I think that's going to be a big conversation over the next couple hundred years.
Oh, okay, so even though Aquarius is an air sign, it's a water bearer, you think that Saturn-Jupiter conjunction has a lot to do with.
Yeah.
Oh, I never thought about that.
Yeah.
Water distribution, you said, huh?
Because it's the waterman with his jug. I mean, his job is to take the water from the river and then dispense it. He's not supposed to hoard it. He's not supposed to hold on to it. It's no good to him sitting in the urn. It's got to get poured out. So the whole image is about dissemination of resources, particularly life-giving resources, and also the cleanliness of the vessel that transports it, because this whole jug of Aquarius, like if it's muddy and dirty, it doesn't matter how clean the water is going in, it's going to be disgusting coming out, you know. So, you know, with Aquarius, you know, Manilius talks about that sign having unparalleled gift for finding sources of water under the earth, for finding water in stone. But, you know, what he's really talking is that the image of the sign itself is connected to water. Same thing with Capricorn. It's an earth sign, but the back half of that is a fish. You know, it's a sea goat. It's got a tail. It is half land, half ocean. And this is why Capricorn is become associated, or was associated with, places where we stored things for ships and for mariners and things like that. You know, it was entirely, the role was to help the seafaring people get the supplies they needed. It was like the Earth's answer to a water sign's need, and that would be Cancer. So Cancer is the one that was associated with international trade and commerce and going over and making foreign trips, all that kind of stuff. And Capricorn was the one who, you know, gave them their wares and made that possible. Yeah.
Cool. That's why, see, this is why I love you so much. All this rich information that like deepens our understanding of astrology from the traditional perspective. Someone asked me yesterday at a webinar about the difference between modern and traditional. So what do you say it is, besides, you know, the outer planets are new, and what else do you say about the differences?
Number one is that modern astrology puts incredibly too much reliance on the signs. These signs, it's like, okay, so we've got signs, we've got houses, and we've got planets. Planets are absolutely the most important. You know, we wouldn't have developed a system of signs if the planets were passing through them. You know, there's plenty of sky where planets travel, and there's no zodiac there. There are simply constellations, but it's not the same kind of energy of what happens with the signs. The signs take their meaning from the sun's passage throughout them, and the other planets' passage through them as well. So the planets are like, if we were to liken it to a play in some way, maybe, it's like the planets themselves are the actors, and you know, the houses would be the landscape, you know, to give us a sense of where in life this particular theme was drawing. It also tells you, you know, what role you're playing. So we've got the actors, but then the houses give you the script in a way. They set out the roles. They give you exactly who's playing who. And then the signs are like the wardrobe department. Super important. I'm not saying that it's not important, but the signs are there to add color, to add dimension. And, you know, the actor, without the actor, none of this goes off, you know, really the central part. So first thing that I would say is the distinction is that the signs have dislodged what should probably have taken pride of place, which are the houses and the planets. The second thing that I would say is that there doesn't seem to be a natural hierarchy with modern astrology. Some people like that. I found it very difficult to figure out even where to begin. You know, one house isn't any more important than the other. One sign's not more important than the other. One planet's not more important than the other. Aspects applying or separating, who cares? You know, it's all very amorphous. And I think that initially this simplified the curriculum, but over time it became the only curriculum, and it got harder for people to push past that when they realized that a lot of their understanding was quite disorganized. Now, I want to be clear, though, that I find modern astrology very, very poetic and inspiring, and there's nothing I like more. If there's traditional astrology talk and a modern psychological astrology talk at a conference at the same hour, I'm almost certainly going to go to the psychological astrologers talk. I think that there's a little bit of a, you know, traditional astrology is, and currently, traditional astrology isn't this way, but right now it's a little overly technique based, you know, it's like, overly obsessed with what perfection year we're in and what that. It's like the headlines get missed because we're so worried about what we could fill out on a chart. We've done our work. Look at all the hard labor we've done. We're traditional astrologers. But what the psychological astrologers have gotten right is they bypassed all of that, you know, and they've really focused on making heartful, meaningful connection to the person that's in front of them and allowing the astrology to guide how they speak. So now, you know, I kind of think that in many respects, the traditional astrologers need to learn a little bit from the modern astrological astrologers about how to talk to people, about how to have a conversation about astrology in a way that's relatable, understandable, digestible. I struggle sometimes, you know, it's an easy thing for me to just ramble on things that feel obvious to me, and I don't realize that, you know, maybe somebody who's a new student won't have picked up on it. But this is where the psychological astrologers do a very great of widening the door for more to come in, and so they deserve our respect, you know. So I've just agree with them all day long on certain things, but I will still be pulling up right next to them and having a drink with them after the day's done. You betcha.
I love that. Yeah, yeah. And it's so like taking the course with you and Deb and Lee for STA with STA about horary. I learned so much of traditional techniques that I missed that has helped deepen my understanding of astrology.
That's beautiful.
Like tenfold. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. 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 Like just even looking at like when you start readings, knowing that, okay, first, fourth, seventh, 10th house, angularity trumps.
Clarity is everything. And one of the things that has really, really wowed me, I mean, Deborah told me this for years, and I was like, I know what you mean, but I didn't know what she meant. I'll tell you a quick story. Like, it was probably 2021, had to have been 2021. I offered natal consultations for the first time. I was trying to figure out how far back in the story I was going to go, and I'm going to make it shorter. And it's not that I didn't offer them, but I just didn't advertise for them. It was like, if you want that from me, you can get it from me. But then I advertised for it. And the reason that I did this was because I finally had found the heartbeat of the type of natal astrology I wanted to practice, which was to put your life to center. Let's talk about what's going on with you right here, right now. What happened this week, the kind of things you might walk into a counselor's office and talk about. We don't need to talk about big overarching life themes, although we can start somewhere much more accessible, somewhere much closer, somewhere that's right here. And what I found was looking at the comparison between the consultation chart and the birth chart. Oh my goodness, what you would see over and over again, the angles are everything. It's like somebody's natal, they might have a Moon-Mars square and a Moon-Saturn opposition, and like a Jupiter-Venus conjunction. And there's a lot to talk about. But then when you sit down in consultation with them and you realize that what's happening on angles, it's the Moon-Mars square that's hitting the angles. This consultation is just about diving into that. We're not going to try and touch everything today. That's not a good task for either of us, So we're just going to pick up what we can pick up. And that technique was amazing for helping me realize that at the heart of 80% of what you need to talk about is lying right in front of your eyes. Don't overcomplicate it. It'll be right on the edge or within 3 degrees of conjunction or, tight aspect. We're not talking 5 degrees, 10 degrees, not even 5. I mean, it's going to be that tight. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I like that perspective. And I use that in I think I'm going to I know I'm going to change from astrology readings to astrology consultations, because I really feel like there's a lot of immediacy with what I'm talking about with my clients. Yeah, that needs to be addressed rather than just, your whole life story. Yeah.
With the consultation chart, you had a good time with it. I don't know if you continued doing it, but
yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I pull a consultation chart when we're having the meeting. I just had a reading that was so on point. Mars was on the ascendant.
Oh, yeah.
Fun. And then the client's moon was opposing Mars. And we spent the whole time talking about that moon opposite Mars. And especially since Mars and Gemini, this client is like feeling that opposition, like intensely. Yeah.
So it's great that you were there to be able to talk them through it. That's good.
Yeah. So I love looking at the consultation chart as a place to start before I start the reading, and utilizing my horary skills in that as well. So why don't you tell everybody what horary is from your perspective?
Yeah. Okay. So horary astrology, I like to think it's like this. Instead of defining the different types of astrology, think about when you go to the doctor or when you go to an advisor of some kind. Walk in and you tell them what your problem is. And then the doctor turns around and they grab the tools that they need to engage with your problem and to resolve it. Astrologers are exactly the same. It's possible that the thing that you want to talk about is a life theme, and it might be that we need to turn to the birth chart to really dig into that. It's possible that the thing that you want to talk about is a plan that you've got in the future that you want to schedule a time and date for. It's possible that you actually don't want to talk about yourself at all. You might want to talk about what's going on in the world with astrology. There are techniques for all of that. But it's also possible that you've come to an astrologer because you have a problem that you cannot solve, You have tried all of the common sense alternatives, and you are now in a position where, I don't want to say you're out of options, but you got, it's time now. We need to know how to proceed. Got to get a better understanding of my problem. This is where the astrologer reaches in their horary bag and pulls that technique out. So what it is a client will come to me and they will explain my dilemma. And it could be, I have lost, my passport. It could be, I'm bidding to get this property. I need to know if I'll be successful. Is it a good purchase? Should I go through with it? It could be, I'd like to leave my job. Is it a good idea? Should I do it? Or can I restore my relationship with my boss? I mean, really, as long as it's sincere and it's your business to know, you can approach a horror astrology with anything. And what the astrologer will do is cast a chart for the moment at which they decide to engage and be present in resolving this situation. Okay. So once that moment comes and the astrologer either does the chart by hand or uses some technique, whether that's through software or something else to have a chart, they now take auspices from the astrology. What we do is we read what the omens are telling us, but that's a little bit more like, even more mystical than the process actually feels like. Because what's going to happen at that moment is I will open up the chart, and there are two conversations that are being, okay? The first is the conversation that's being had in a very general sense. We might see, for instance, that the sun is on the midheaven, and so this is talking about a situation that is going to uplift principles of bravery and illumination and transparency, because that's the role of the sun. It might also be that that a planet like Mars is cadent, which suggests that what's not going to be useful at this time are things like anger, fighting, being ready to withdraw the sword. It may be that at the bottom of the chart, we find a planet like Mercury or the moon, which suggests that there's a deep inner world about what's going on that this person is not talking about. There's something very deep driving the question, the situation. It appears to be a simple question about X, Y, and Z, but underneath it, there is very deep something that needs to get unrooted if we're really going to work through this problem. So what the astrology does, and this first layer of conversation, is it tells me what are the principles and themes that resonate with this situation. What is, and what's getting uplifted, what's being shown as being suppressed, what's being shown as not useful right now, what's being shown as available resources, right? The next thing is that we layer in the specifics of you. So we're not just talking anymore about, the situation calls for bravery, it calls for illumination. Now we're going to take a look and say, so who is the source of this? Where is that going to come? Who's got to interact? What are the stakes? How do we get this started? How productive will it appear to be? And we resolve the question through the interpretation of the symbols. So in a question, that might ask about a missing object, for instance, if we were to see the sun up on the midheaven, I would take that as a very good sign, an initial sign that this item wants to be found. It wants to be recovered, because the question came and was, in front of an astrologer at the time when the chief luminary, the sun, is in its most brilliant spot in the sky, which is the highest it will reach. And so it wants to flood the situation with light. If, however, I found the sun in the fourth house, that would be an argument against recovery, because what's being submerged and suppressed and pushed down is the principle of illumination, transparency. It'll make it harder, significantly harder, for us to be able to recall what happened, how did this come to be missing, and retrace our steps. So that's it. You could learn astrology. I probably could teach somebody how to do astrology in about 45 minutes, just from a very basic, here are the themes. But then you might spend the rest of your life, trying to figure out how this works, what the configurations look like, gathering experience to be able to say with confidence, this situation is very clearly suggested that this is the direction the situation is going. Or sometimes something comes and you go, honestly, I don't know. So I need to tell you, if it's a no, it's going to look like this. And if there's a path, here's the only one that's going to present itself. It's going to look like this. I recently had a situation like that. And what the client actually came back with, what's crazy is both of those things presented themselves. The no and the yes path. And because I knew that this one was the yes path, I went for it and it worked out. But I didn't expect it to be that clean. What I meant to communicate at the time was the situation's hanging in the balance. And, even as an astrologer, all I'm really going to be able to do right now is better acquaint you with the nature of the problem you have, how you got here, and probably give you a timeline for resolution and some hints about how you might think about resolving it. So sometimes you can't go so far as to give them the exact answer. You just help them sit with their problem a little bit longer for their own awareness. And this is the beauty of horror, is that it's not about predicting, everything, from the start to the finish, getting everything right. What horror is actually about is helping someone resolve their problems, helping somebody connect better with what they're going through, and get them more in line, their own consciousness aligned. It's like they're able to be more present. So it's like it provides that psycho-spiritual shock that gets them back into their own willpower. That's the moment. That's what we're really for.
I love that. Yeah, I find a lot of times, like, the conversation during a horary consultation brings up a lot of things that were submerged that they didn't even realize.
Always.
Even if it's not so clear what the final outcome will be. It's an incredible technique. It's my favorite thing to do.
Then people come to you and they'll have these discussions, and will he leave his wife for me this time? You don't need astrology to answer that, Celeste. We know he's not going to leave your wife. Not now, not next time, not ever. It's not where this is going. But we need the astrology, because the astrology is a roadmap into helping her or him, whoever is asking this question, unlock why they are stuck in this thing when they know the answer. They know the answer. And sometimes even a really powerful consultation still ends in a client saying, I know, but the work has been done. That was the work, was to get out of this tap dance where we weren't paying attention to what was going on.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, so this has been a spectacular conversation. I did notice you mentioned TMA, so you write for the Mountain Astrologer.
Yes.
Your column is what is your column focused on? I read it every year.
Mundane astrology. Yes.
Okay, so just
pop culture and news and whatever, anything that happens in the world, whatever we feel like doing. The editorial team is supportive in helping me identify the most reader friendly topics. Because sometimes they suggest things that are like,
yeah. You have such varied interests. I remember something I went to, you were talking about the was it Nigeria or was it Kenya?
Kenya, but yeah. Well, that was because I got hired by 2 economists in Kenya to help them rebuild an astrology of their nation. They had not had astrology hadn't really been that forward in their environment since the 70s, and they wanted to find a way to kind of revive it and bring it back. And so I was just there to help support, do some of the lifting for them. Great experience. I loved it. So we took a look at the Kenyan elections, and that was a spicy bit of history we got to take a look at. But you're right. I mean, it came out of left field. I didn't expect it, but once I got into it, the truth is, if I could clear a little bit more time, I'd love to really get back into that work. We have a couple ideas of where we want to take that project next. So you might be the symbol that I've been waiting for, Celeste, to get back with these. To get this back on the road.
I love that. So what are you doing now? Do you have any new classes coming up or what?
Always. So you can email me if you like, but I've got webinars about every 2 weeks that I've done. I'm teaching horary for the STA, and I now teach astronomy for the STA. And that course is, it's getting refined, and it's nice finishing touch. I think 1 or 2 more deliveries, and it'll be a nice sealed package. So it's every time.
I took the astronomy course with you.
No, you took the pilot. You took it in the very beginning.
Pilot, yeah, that was fun.
Although
Saturn in the sky was squaring my Mercury at the time. I mean,
well, I was that Saturn.
You were, because some of that stuff turned my brain into knots.
That was probably right on my sun. I bet it was in the what degree is your Mercury?
21 Taurus.
My sun is at 15 Aquarius. So when Saturn was on my sun, you know, it was in square to your Mercury when it was in between those. So I was your Saturn at that time, so I can completely appreciate that. But yeah, it's getting, it's been redeveloped and hopefully getting, you know, a little bit easier every time we deliver it, you know, which is good.
Yeah.
But
Yes, yeah. And your website is wadecaves.com, right?
it is, yeah, wadecaves.com. Yeah, and you can also,
Yeah.
not terribly active on Instagram, but you know, I'm on there sometimes. So
Well, I'll invite you to collaborate with this so you can put this on your page if you
I
like.
love it. I might actually start doing this a little bit more. This was really fun. I enjoyed it. Yeah,
Oh,
thank you. Yeah.
oh, good. Yeah. Well, you're welcome to come back anytime you want to rap about astrology. You know, I love it. Love it. Love
That's
it.
so cute. Thank you. Thank you. And thanks for everybody who's been sending these lovely comments. Hello, everybody.
Yes. Yeah. Patty really felt it. Imagine I see images I see. She has a stellium in Gemini, and this
Oh, so,
Mars has been.
yes, 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 yes. I can imagine. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
Pisces rising. And so you'll be feeling it doubly because if you have Pisces rising, that Mars and square to the ascendant at the same time, it was going over the IC. Ooh, nice and ticklish. So,
Yes. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Wade. I so appreciate your
of
time.
course,
This has been a great conversation.
yeah, yeah, wonderful. Thank you for having me. I love you all. And I guess what do I do? Do I just hang up? I just
Yeah,
push.
you just hang up. Yeah. Bye. Have a great weekend.
You too. Bye.
Bye. I'll see you at Norway. Okay. Yeah.